Hi, you're listening to This Is Not Your Practice Life. I'm your host, Macy Renee, and we are going on a journey together, my friends. I'm a certified life and emotional intelligence coach. And if you really want to step into your highest self, there are a few non-negotiables you're going to have to learn, and I am just the person to help you do it. No matter your past, I'm here to help you create a more fulfilling future. So stick around with me. Not only will I teach you how to navigate your brain's daily mind drama, but I'll help you actually understand your mind, your emotions, why you do the things you do, and why others do the things they do. Most importantly, I'll help you build the self-awareness skills to create whatever results you want. It's never too late to change the trajectory of your life. After all, this is not your practice life. Well, hello there. Welcome back to another episode of This Is Not Your Practice Life podcast. My name is Macy, and I am so happy you're joining me today. We're going to get right into it, and I just want to preface with this title that I've picked. Of all the titles that I could pick, I picked it, and it is so hard for me to say, and I have had to delete this intro multiple times and re-record it because I keep pronouncing the word wrong. But I don't want to change the beginning word of this title, which seems silly, but at some point I'm probably just going to find another way to talk about this in today's episode. But the title of today's episode is Catastrophizing Ahead of Time. Okay? And this episode is for those of you who would consider yourself an anxious Nelly, where you're probably a type A planner. You want to think of as many things ahead of time as possible, or maybe you don't want to be that way, but you just find that you naturally are. And a lot of the reason why is because you're trying to avoid disaster. So if you're an anxious person, I refer to myself as an anxious Nelly sometimes, then this is probably going to be the episode for you, okay? So catastrophizing, if that's even a word, ahead of time, okay? So here is what I mean by this. Usually, if someone is anxious, and a lot of times when I'm talking about anxiety, I'm not even talking about like clinically diagnosed. I'm talking about like if you have had a previous experience, if that previous experience created emotions that did not feel good in your body, then what your brain does to protect you from ever feeling those things again is try to anticipate when they're going to happen. This is what your brain does to make you feel safe. So unfortunately, and fortunately, in some ways, if you have ever experienced something in your life that has felt hard or challenging, or you have characterized it as traumatic, what that really means is something happened in your life and you had a visceral response to it that felt unpleasant. And visceral is just like that reaction that happens inside of your body. So it's very jarring. It's like your brain makes the connection of like, oh my God, this created like a total physical response in my body when this thing happened. And so for some of us, we have maybe experienced that in young childhood years. For me, my youngest visceral memory was at 2 years old. For others, it may be a little bit later in life. For some, it may be the teen years. For some, it may be adult years. But the interesting thing about even our visceral responses, or the things that sometimes cause us to be anxious later, the thing about it that we have to remember is that everybody's experience is unique to them and how their brain and body characterized it at that time. So what I mean by that is that I could have 10 people that have had the exact same experience. Like, for instance, let's just use the example of like their parents getting divorced at 10 years old, okay? So if your parents got divorced at 10 years old, you could line up 10 people, and some of those 10-year-olds could say it's not a problem. It was nice seeing that my mom and dad were both happier apart, and it actually was good for our family and it didn't negatively impact us. And you could have several other 10-year-olds who experienced the exact same thing say that that was one of the most traumatic days of my life. Like, I still remember everything that happened in my body. I remember feeling nauseous. I remember crying myself to sleep. I remember, like, everybody is going to have a different experience. And that's why for each of us, we want to be very compassionate about what other people label as being traumatic or life altering for them, because that is so unique to the individual and how their own body responded to it. And so for people that have had moments like this, what the body does is say, okay, that was super uncomfortable. And it especially does this if we did not have the emotional tools to deal with that traumatic event at the time. So what we will typically experience with the lack of tools, where we haven't been taught anything maybe about emotional resilience or how to actually feel our emotions and move through them, what will linger is this feeling of, oh my gosh, that event really impacted my life. It impacted my life in a way that did not feel good to me at the time. And for your brain, it's like, I never, ever want to experience what that pain felt like again. Ultimately saying, because I don't think I would survive it again. I don't think I would have the tools again. I think I would feel the exact same way again, and I would not be able to get through it. That's ultimately what our brain does for the people who have had an event and now know that they feel anxious anytime they think of anything similar. And sometimes we don't even know why we're feeling anxious about things, but it's because our body had a visceral response with certain environments, sounds, people, things. And if you even put yourself in a situation that's similar, it will create all of those same kind of responses in your body, with those, along with those subconscious thoughts, because it's like, if we get you to see it or to understand it, you can plan how we're going to get out of this ahead of time. And so for a lot of people, that means avoidance, or it can mean over planning, like really being hyper vigilant. And I can tell you that for me, my personal experience with the just childhood experiences that I've had, I had great childhood experiences and memories that I love being able to recall, but I also have several traumatic events in there that no child should ever have to have had to navigate. Hence why I was in therapy for 17 years. Like, there was a lot of growing up really fast in order to survive, so to speak, emotionally, mentally. It was really hard at times. And so there's that contrast of both. There's really great memories that I love to relive, and then there's memories where it's like, that was so painful and so difficult. And what it has created in me as an adult, especially before I had any kind of coaching or like self-awareness work or emotional intelligence work, what it created in me was super hyper vigilance, in the sense of being very highly sensitive. And I don't even mean highly sensitive in terms of like you're overly emotional or you're super emotional. I mean highly sensitive in like terms of intuition, where oftentimes if you place me into an environment or you place me in a room full of people, I can read the room very quickly. I can pick up on the energy very quickly. I can pick up on people's true intentions a lot of times very quickly. I tend to be able to read people like a book, which some people don't like. I think it makes me a really good coach for people who want to understand themselves, but for people who are guarded and maybe don't want people to see them, know them, understand them, I'm probably not their favorite person to be around, because energetically, emotionally, mentally, intuitively, I can read it really fast. And there's one hand of that I think is kind of just a gift, right? An innate gift that has always been in me in some ways. But I think another thing that makes it so very strong, and I have found this with a lot of anxious people or people who describe themselves as being highly anxious, is that we pick up on the things that are very subtle for other people. And the reason being is because our body and our brain is like, I need to notice every little thing so that I can plan perfectly to make sure that we're not going to get hurt, that we're not going to feel uncomfortable things, that this is not going to be a problem, that this person's not going to hurt us, that this environment's not going to hurt us. If we can anticipate the next 6 steps, then we'll be good. But what oftentimes is created from this is catastrophizing ahead of time. A lot of times the downside of being this person before we've become emotionally equipped, emotionally mature, emotionally intelligent, emotionally aware, like all the emotional tools, before we have this, what ends up happening is we put ourselves through the suffering twice. Okay, so this was profound for me whenever I hired my coach in 2016. And in particular, it was when I was going on a retreat of hers in 2017. And you all have, if you've been here on the podcast, you've heard me talk about the Michigan retreat, the one that my Opa, which was my great grandpa, helped me get on. I mean, when I tell you that retreat was worth every penny of my life, like, I didn't just have one epiphany at that retreat. I had like 20. I was coached so hard. I showed up for myself so deeply. I asked questions when I knew I was going to get painful answers. It really was a profound thing for me. And another lesson that was huge for me at that retreat was, grieving. I was grieving something that felt so challenging for me. So I'll just go into detail because I feel like it helps my audience, and I'm pretty much an open book for the most part. So what do I care, right? But one of the things that I was navigating when I went on that retreat was the guilt of my Opa, aka my great grandpa, having emptied his savings, which was savings that he had saved particularly for me. My Opa had 3 or 4 grandchildren and then 3 great grandchildren, I think. And what he did is he would walk the neighborhood, in his retirement and everything. He would pick up Pepsi cans and Coke cans and Sprite cans and all the things. And then he would go and turn them in and get money for them. And the money that he would get for recycling back in the 90s, whatever, maybe even before then, he would put on little CDs for the bank, and then that money would grow over time. And so he had an account for each of his grandkids and great-grandkids, and I was one of his great-grandchildren, and his life savings for me in particular was about $3,000 on a CD. And I had approached my Oma and my Opa one day, and I was just talking about this retreat and how I really wanted to be on it, and it was really important to me. And I had tried to apply for a credit card and I got denied, and I had tried to apply for a loan and I'd gotten denied. And I asked my grandma for the money and she had said no. And so I was just trying to figure out how I was going to get myself on this retreat, because it really felt like, that intuitiveness in me was like, I just know that this is going to change my life. I know I need this. And I think that my Opa could feel the conviction in my voice. And so although I did not ever ask my Oma and Opa for the money, my Opa said, you have money that I have saved for you in my bank. Do you want to go get it? And I just bawled when he asked me, because yeah, of course. And also I felt guilt. I felt like I don't want to use this money and then let you down. I feel like going is going to change my life, change the whole trajectory of my life, but I also don't ever want to disappoint. And my Opa also had at this time a bunch of health issues. He had been in the hospital, at different points just months before. And intuitively, again, I really felt like time was slipping and that he wasn't going to be around much longer. And so I was experiencing so much pre-grief is the only way that I know how to describe it. I had never before losing my OPA had like a major family loss. Like I lost an uncle I was pretty close with, but never anybody that was like super close with me. And so here I was at, 20, maybe 24, 25 years old. And we go to the bank and he takes out the money and he tells me, he was like, I would rather see you get this while I'm alive than to wonder ever if you would have gotten it once I'm gone. And so you really are sure you want this? And I said, yes. And we got the money and I paid my coach and I was so excited to go on this retreat. And when I went on this retreat, I remember feeling like the guilt that I was carrying in my throat. Like it was just so heavy. And I really felt like I don't have much time with my OPA. I really feel like he's going to pass away soon. And the anxiety of that was killing me. Like even the thought of being in Michigan while he was in Kentucky, for 3 or 4 days was so hard for me. I kept having all of this anxiety, like something's going to happen to him while I'm here. And I won't be able to deal with it and I won't be able to bear it. And my coach had at one point asked me like what I was carrying. Like she could see, I don't know, the emotion, the read all over my body. And I just opened up to her and I cried and I said, I'm just so afraid I'm going to lose my OPA and he's helped me get here. And I want to make him proud. I want to get everything, that I came here to get, but I don't want to lose him. I don't feel like I'll be able to deal with the grief. And also, on top of that, our family had a history of when there was a life-altering event, like a death, it would send one of my family members into a mental health spiral. And that had been very traumatic for my family. And so I was also anticipating, and I remember this coming out of my mouth, I had anticipated that once my OPA passed away, which would be life-altering to all of us, there would be certain family members I feared that wouldn't be able to cope. And if they weren't able to cope, then I would have to do what I had done in the past when another family member had passed away that I wasn't close with, but this family member of mine that I'm referring to was. And everything in our life fell apart from that due to some mental health related issues. And what I did back then is I did not feel any of my emotions. I buckled up my boots. I put on my big girl panties. I stuffed my feelings down as deep as I could stuff them down. And I, again, buckled up as basically an adult, a young adult, stepping in for the adults that couldn't adult, if that makes sense, without being too detailed. And it was really hard. And I felt like even though back then I was going through such hard things, I couldn't show it. I couldn't share it. I couldn't fall apart. And it really took a toll on my mental health. So fast forward at this retreat, I feared my OPA passing away. I feared it triggering this family member. And I feared having to swallow my own deep, painful grief and pretending that I was okay in order to keep our family from falling apart once again. And there was such fear, like it had chains on me. I can't even describe to you the chains that it had on me. And one of the biggest things that my coach said to me at the time was, do you want to suffer twice? Do you want to suffer twice? And through my tears, I just was stunned. I mean, just absolutely stunned. I knew what she meant, but it was also like, what do you mean? And, she went on to describe like your anxiety, everything that you're anticipating, a lot of what you're anticipating is from your past, which is really what anxiety does, right? Anxiety digs up the past and says, I've experienced something like this before. I've experienced similar feelings before. I don't want to feel these feelings again. And so therefore, I need to try to think ahead of time about how I'm going to cope before anything happens. I need to think about how I'm going to cope so that when it happens, I can deal with it. And what this ultimately is a false sense of protection. It's catastrophizing ahead of time. Okay. Because the truth of the matter is that as much as your brain is trying to trick you into believing that if you go ahead and freak out now, that you'll know how to respond later, most times, I would say 99.9% of the time, it's not true. What you're doing instead is creating the emotions ahead of time and suffering before you actually have to suffer, if you even have to suffer at all. Like you're creating your worst case scenario and living in it before anything has ever even happened. Therefore, you are now creating results and emotions, and you're driving your own actions on something you don't even want to happen, let alone something that has not happened. And it's a very interesting thing for the brain. It makes total sense because your brain's job is to protect us, right? It's to protect you, it's to protect myself. But what you're ultimately doing in those moments with catastrophizing ahead of time is you're suffering twice. And so in that moment, my coach helped me see, like, you don't have to feel any of this now because it hasn't happened yet. Like, you get to leave here and tell your brain to enjoy as much time as you have left, whether that's days, weeks, months, or years. And when that day comes, you will feel all the feelings that you're feeling now. Or you may feel completely different feelings than you're feeling now. But it does not serve you to feel it twice. Your brain thinks that it's serving you because it thinks if you go ahead and feel it now, it will be less painful and less intense when it actually happens. And she said, and I promise you that is not true. And interestingly enough, that conversation, that coaching gave me so much peace. And I walked away from that retreat just thinking, for as long as I have left, I'm just going to live it up. I'm going to be super present. I'm going to, do everything that I can and just try to release this control, which I think is what people with anxiety really, really want to feel, is in control. And I think that's another reason why we suffer twice, is because we want to feel in control. And even when we don't, we really don't feel in control of our emotions, we try to convince ourselves, oh, if I just keep thinking this and planning ahead, then I'm in control. And it's not true. So interestingly enough, 2 weeks after this, my opa did pass away. 2 weeks after I got back from my retreat, he passed away. And guess what? I felt all of the emotions that I had been suffering with weeks before at a much greater intensity. And when that happened, it really, really helped me see, I did not have to carry those emotions twice. Because what I did was fill this level of grief for months and months before I needed to. And now I'm feeling it again. And what was interesting is all of the worst case scenario catastrophes that I planned for, those things didn't even happen. They didn't even happen. And so here's the thing, you guys, you don't want your body living in a constant state of stress. You don't want your body in a constant state of releasing cortisol. It's not good for us. There's so much research showing it actually changes your gene expression. It communicates with your body. It stresses them out. It's like being a lit up Christmas tree year round. You don't leave your Christmas lights on year round. Even if you leave your tree up somewhere, you don't leave the Christmas lights on all year round. If you do, bulbs are going to burn out. And when one burns out and two burns out and the whole strand burns out, then you have to remove everything from the tree and go replace it. Only the thing is with the body, when those bulbs essentially burn out, people end up getting diagnosed with different autoimmune disorders, different cancers. A lot of that stuff we don't even realize comes from our levels of stress. So we have to be very, very mindful about what is happening in our mind, what emotions we're carrying, how that affects what we do or do not do in our life, and the results that we're getting. And if we don't like the results that we're getting, we have to go through, I call it reverse engineering, and look at what thoughts am I thinking most of the time? What emotions am I having trouble coping with? Because that's where your tools are going to be so important. That's where equipping yourself with tools is going to be vital. so that you're not doing more harm than good long term. Okay? So I really hope that this episode helps you if you feel like you catastrophize a lot, or if you feel like you're an anxious Nelly a lot. And if anything, I hope it helps you also have the courage to reach out for help, right? Reach out if you're super, super anxious and it is affecting your ability to get out of bed, if you are having trouble, working, if you are also dealing with things like maybe depression, if you kind of feel just purposeless and you're really struggling with your mental health in a deep way, reach out to a therapist, find a therapist. They will be able to really help you through. If you're just finding that you're anxious, here and there, but it does feel like, it's creating things in your life you don't want, you're finding yourself, just living life differently than you imagined, and you're still getting up, you're still getting yourself ready, you're going to work every day, like you feel good, you have good days, you have bad days, but for the most part, you're just like, I need to build emotional resilience. I need maybe some emotional intelligence, or I need to improve it. I need, to feel like I can maturely respond to my emotions, especially the ones that don't feel good. I want to be more in control of my thoughts. I want, I just want to feel different a year from now, or 6 months from now, or 5 years from now. I want to look at my life and just really be happy and feel excited to wake up each day, which maybe right now it feels a little challenging to do. Then that's probably a good sign you're ready for coaching. Like you're done with what you've been doing and you're truly ready to work on alternative solutions, in which case having a coach is really, really great. And if you need, if you resonate with my coaching style, if you like the podcast, if you resonate with the things on MacyRenee.com where you can learn more about me, you can always schedule a free 60-minute consult and we can talk about ways that I can help you. Okay. So I hope that this episode was helpful to you. And if you're an anxious Nelly, which I totally understand because I have to work on my anxiousness a lot too, I just want to remind you that having tools makes it so much better. It doesn't always mean that your brain is perfect and never thinks of anything, catastrophe-wise, because mine certainly still does, but I'm able to calm myself down and center before I absolutely fall apart. I'm able to recognize things much faster, and it doesn't totally overtake and create things in my life that I don't want it to. I'm able to catch it so much faster. So if you know that you're in need of that, I would just encourage you to reach out and see if I can help you. And if I can, I would love to. And if I can't, I'd love to refer you to someone who would be a better fit. So have a great week. And if you need anything at all, please reach out. Hey there. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of This Is Not Your Practice Life podcast. If you'd like to connect on social media, you can find me on both Instagram and Facebook at Macy Renee Coaching. And if you want to stay up to date on all of my offers, announcements, and inspirational emails, you can join my email list at macyrenee.com. In addition, if there's a way that I can further support you in your coaching journey, you can schedule a free 60-minute consult at macyrenee.com anytime you want so we can discuss the best options for you. I look forward to seeing you next week, and I hope you have an amazing day.